trying to understand where people are coming from and trying to understand different things is when I saw that the student body president at the time, who was a Black woman, which was very inspiring, speak on that stage. And I knew at that very moment that that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be student body president of the school. I started, in student government my sophomore year, and after that, I took a break to a very much needed mental health break to start the Ghanaian Student Organization, and then I decided to run again junior year. Um, Afterwards, what I learned about leadership is that oftentimes you have to be okay with hearing the word no, and then, but that kind of begs the question of what you're gonna do after the no. Are you just gonna lay down and have it become a a constant cycle of hearing no's and not being able to get your way, or are you gonna pivot and provide and really deliver for the student body? So that's one thing that I've learned as well.
Thank you guys for sharing all of that. And I heard, some things about family. I heard some things about engagement in high school. And in the lessons, it's some sentiments about like expanded perspectives in what leadership can look like, what to expect out of leadership, and the things that come with the titles that you bear. Not everything, like getting comfortable with no, understanding other people have other perspectives, and oftentimes the perspectives they're bringing are valid. Those are all some great sentiments, and I guess that'll also take me into my next question, which is about like a little bit of conflict resolution, but then also different perspectives. And how do you balance external voices trying to impose their perspectives on the way that you govern or the way that you go about fulfilling your duties as student body president? Because I feel like people who aren't a part of student government or understand how student government or the institution works can have a lot of opinions, and share those opinions with you and ask you to take measures that realize the end of their opinion. But oftentimes it's not that easy. Most of the time, it's not that easy. So how do you guys go about balancing expectations that your peers may have, and then also the reality of the institutions and the reality of the roles and responsibilities that you all have as student body presidents? And then that was a loaded question. Yeah. But we can honestly, I'll start splitting it with Jonathan and Ashley, if you guys want to maybe go half and half and talk about that as co-presidents.
Sure. Yeah, this is something that I think me and Ashley have to deal with a lot. I think, starting with external influence, I think there was a lot during our term where there was outside of the college, outside the university level influence. So that was a lot to manage as well. So not even necessarily like other peers, but people outside of the university sort of wanting the student government to take certain actions in certain ways. And then the other expectation obviously is like the students. So as we all know, and like you clearly articulated, making change is really hard at an institution. Institutions like Ashley has taught me in her social, what was it?
My sociology.
Sociology classes. Institutions seek to sort of preserve themselves in their current form, right? And at our school, specifically, there is a lot of bureaucracy to sort of maintaining the current form of whatever it is, right? A lot of times you will push for something and the answer you get back is no, why? This is how we do things, right? And so going into it, me and Ashley already understood because we had experience on the HOA previously that a lot of things that students wanted just weren't going to be possible. If not in the future, at least not now, because the way that our school moves is it does it in 2 to 3 periods, right? 2 to 3 year periods. So like when it plans to do things in the future, a lot of things are sort of set in stone. And so going into it as a team, we sort of have to come together and understand what is realistic and what is like doable. And so once you do that, it gets a lot easier to manage expectations because you can flat out say, here's what's not going to be able to happen, right? But how can we get close to that? And so that's sort of, I think, what I would say on managing expectations.
Yeah. I would just add, I think when I think about this question, what comes to my mind is just Jonathan and I have remained grounded in who it is that we are. Like we ran on a platform of building a united Harvard. And the reason why I think that's important is because, to your point, there are people who constantly have competing expectations. Take a side on this, speak on that. And I think what's been important to Jonathan and I is ensuring that we're not alienating anyone on campus and that we're staying true to what our mission was, which is to build a united Harvard, to bring resources to students. And so I think to answer that question, it's about remaining true to who you are and the platforms that you ran on. And then I think the other piece of it is just calling people in instead of calling people out. I think on Harvard's campus, at least, there's this sort of culture of calling people out and being like, you did this, now you're canceled. I think that's something that Jonathan and I have been intentional about trying to do is calling people in. Like, you say you have a problem, come to a student government meeting, come talk to us. Like, we're people, we're your peers. We want to hear your voices and we want to see how we can meet at a common ground. So I think my two tidbits here would be staying true to who you are and calling people in.
And then, sorry, just add one more thing. I think you just have to be comfortable knowing that everything that you do isn't going to be received well, right? Because you're receiving information where you understand what the right choice is, right? But because for a lot of students, they're not necessarily taking the time out of their day to sort of look at it from all the different angles. There was one right answer and one right answer only. And so I think going into it, for me, what was super helpful was understanding that like not all of my decisions were going to be appreciated, not everything was going to be shown, and sometimes the decisions that were made were not only not going to be appreciated, but they were going to be hated. But it was like sort of necessary. So not only do you have to manage expectations, I think, of other people, you also have to look at yourself and sort of see what is possible.
Did you guys add anything to that?
Yeah. I think that oftentimes, I mean, Jonathan kind of said it very well. Institutions do tend to be very bureaucratic, and as students, obviously, you're not paid to go through the bureaucracy. You're just there for a degree. But at the same time, you know, a lot of students feel very strongly about an issue regardless, despite the fact that they're just there for a degree. For us, I think Ashley bringing up the fact that she, you know, you guys ran on a specific platform of unity. I think on my sense, when we were running, we had the expectations that, you know, by virtue of our identity, which is something we might have to tackle later, by virtue of the identity and the composition of our slate, we were viewed as more socially activist. So we had that kind of perception tagged onto us. So with those perceptions in a, you know, deeply divided campus with a lot of interests, there are people that are gonna disagree with the things that you do even before you do it, and at the same time don't have the capacity and don't have the time to delve into why such issues are this way. So it could create a pretty challenging environment to make decisions whereby they're viewed as, you know, me, Kwasi Antwi, taking all of the, you know, all of the information and making a fair decision that isn't biased in a certain sense. And you have to be okay with that. And one thing that I've learned is that, you know, if there's a student that comes to me and, you know, tries to talk to me about why I did what I did, I'll try my best to, you know, give that student hope. Like, hey, if you want something done on campus, like let's say you want to make Boston University a sanctuary campus, right? I'm not going to destroy the hope of that student saying like, hey, by the way, like BU is not going to be a sanctuary campus. I'm going to explain to that student like, as of right now, this is how this thing works. But in the future, you know, with constant, you know, advocacy, with constant, you know, pressuring of administration, this could happen. But I'm not going to shy away from the fact that, you know, I'm going to break it down for you and say that, you know, as of right now, something like this might not happen right now. That makes sense.
Thank you.
I guess even adding on to that point, I think one of the biggest things this year has been how can we make ourselves more accessible to the rest of the student body? And what that meant was expanding our student government a lot more. One of my biggest beliefs is that I'm so blessed to be able to sit in on these meetings with administrators, hear a lot of the things that are going on behind the scenes, but in the same vein, a lot of information that I'm privy to that doesn't affect me as much as other students on campus. So when we're talking about, you know, taking away certain programs, the effects of the federal government, while of course some of these things might affect me, there's a lot of students on this campus who it affects a lot more, who aren't privy to the same conversations because you're not a part of student government. So my biggest thing this year is how can we expand as much as possible? Because when we see a lot of students who are coming up to us asking these questions or kind of confused or feeling some type of way, it's not necessarily that I guess they don't understand student government, just they don't have the access to understand student government. And so I think that's the number one thing. I think that's one thing that everyone has really addressed. But also second thing that I really agree with Jonathan and Ashley about is I guess just being able to trust your own gut. I think especially being in like positions of leadership, one of the biggest things is if you listen too much to external forces, I guess you kind of forget what you're elected to do and why you're actually there for, and you forget your own policy and your own platform. But in the same vein, if you only listen to yourself and not external people, you in the same vein don't become an accessible leader. And so it's kind of how can we kind of navigate that fine line? But one of the biggest things this year has been, how can I trust my own gut? How can I say like, hey, we're doing this, and being able to like stand on business when it comes to that decision? And how in the same vein can I say, let's listen to other people and I guess be open. So it's like, again, it's a very fine line of being able to be open enough, but also in the same vein, being strong enough in your own decision. But the biggest thing has been, how can I listen? But in the same vein, how can I take charge?
Thank you all for those responses. And this next question touches on both like your individual experience, but then also like perspectives that you maybe have developed in your position. So the first one is about like how has it been navigating being student body presidents of predominantly white institutions as people who I believe, and I know you all identify as Black, I'm not gonna say believe, but yeah, like that's one. And then the second part about that, and some of what you guys were just sharing, is like, and specifically here where you're talking about access, and people maybe don't. It's not that they can't improve student government or care about student government, but they don't have access or exposure to it. And with that being the reality, like there's only so much that you all can do as student body presidents to increase access and increase exposure. But even as you do that, like the institution is still going to do what the institution does, and has done in the past and will do in the future. So how do you guys navigate that reality as well? And how do you feel about that reality in the sense that like, although you are in this position and you're standing for your communities, the institution, like it's only a piece of the larger institution's operations. Yeah. Does that sit with you guys? Is that valid?
Yeah.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah,
I can
start.
take it on. In the first couple of months of the term, of my term, around September, I kind of I want to tackle the predominantly white institution
ahead.
part because that's something that's extremely important. Because at BU, we got our first Black woman president, and I know Harvard has had some unpacking to do with that, but ours has been gracious enough to stay. I think that during the September when she got inaugurated, it coincided with our admissions numbers coming out post affirmative action, and seeing the drop in the amount of Black first years that were admitted to BU was shocking to me, not just as student body president, but as a Black person. So I decided to address it in the first few months of my term. And what occurred after that was a back and forth with administration, who, happened to be white, about why my opinion concerning Black issues and Black first year enrollment as a Black person wasn't necessarily the strategy in which administration wanted to pursue, right? Having everything that you feel is right in order to further your people be shot down by people that don't necessarily understand where you're coming from, just as a matter of life. And I think that those things are tough, but in times in which administration, shoots you down as a Black person for advocating for the things that matter to you, a solace for me has been falling back into my community, and understanding that the Black community at BU, large part, were the people that got me in there in the first place. And the fact that I'm fighting for these issues matters to them, and that should matter to me, despite what administration says.
I guess I can go next. I think in terms of I guess just being Black on campus and experiencing the dichotomies of being a Black student, a Black student also being a student body president. I've seen, I think, a lot of veiled comments and a lot of microaggressions that exist, especially in Tufts parades itself as being a very liberal institution. And I think especially compared to a lot of my friends who go to other different places, I do see a lot of those elements. But in that same vein, I think it's really easy to kind of think that racism only lies on a certain part of a compass, in the sense that, because we go to a school in Boston, we go to school in Massachusetts, that we're kind of free or escaping a lot of the things that do exist. And just hearing comments, hearing statements, this year, last year, in terms of so many social issues that were going on, it really does kind of change your perspective a lot. I think it also makes you kind of realize, to a certain extent, that the administrators that you're working with aren't necessarily your friends and more so your colleagues, and kind of really understanding that balance that does exist. Um, I really want to echo what Kwasi said about being able to fall back into your own community, because I think that's one thing that I think I was really blessed to have, is that at the end of the day, if a situation happens, I know who I'm also rooting for, and being able to go back and kind of reset, take your home base. My vice president this semester is also a Black woman who's been super engaged with the community. My executive board is predominantly made up of students of color, first generation as well. But in the same vein, one of the biggest fears is that next year, and just seeing the engagement on campus, trying to mobilize the Black community to still be in these spaces, because we've been blessed in the sense that last year and the year before we've had predominantly Black student governments. We've had strong Black executive boards. But the biggest thing is that if we're not inside of these rooms, these conversations are happening without us there, if that makes sense. Like, they're still going to be talking about affirmative action, they're still going to be talking about DEI. The question is, are we going to be in a room to advocate for ourselves? If not, I mean, they're still going to have it. My professor, he made this one statement that I think really stuck with me and encouraged me to even run for student government in the first place, was, if you're not on the table, you're on the menu. And by that saying, like, if you're not a part of these conversations that are happening, you're the first one to go. And so just being able to try to mobilize Black people, especially, to still be in these rooms and to still be in these conversations, that's the reason why we've even expanded student government in the first place, was because we said we need to make sure that more students of color, first generation, international students, the ones who, in all honesty, these next 4 years are going to be targeting and hurting the most, need to be in these rooms to be able to fight back again for themselves. Because if you're not advocating for yourself, the truth of the matter is, these administrators may not be arguing for you, if that makes sense. And so that's just been my biggest thing this year, is being able to, like, try to mobilize the community to still be in these rooms, because now more than ever, especially, we need more students of color to be presidents, to be vice presidents, to be trustee representatives, to be inside of these rooms. Because again, if you're not there, you're being spoken about. If that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, like, I have the questions I have set, but you guys are bringing up some things that make me want to ask more questions. So that, I guess that's a good problem to have. But I will pick on a question a little bit more on this point you're talking about as well. Like, if you're not in the room, the conversations are still going to be had. And I guess looking to the rest of your term, and then even next year, with some of these things that are happening on the national landscape, not going to name anything specifically, that how do you guys see the next person who's going to step into your role as student body presidents? Like, what sort of things would you tell them to proactively, be preparing for, and to be looking into, and to be conscious of, as they navigate what is potentially, like what could be our future? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
I guess I would tell them to not give up on diversity. I think that within this national landscape, even just like trying to look at everything that's going on, even past like Black first year enrollment declining from 9% to 3%, which is 6%. And what's really funny is that, we want to argue about accessibility, but the same amount of Black students applied. But regardless of that, it becomes really easy to see these issues transpiring in the way that they do, seeing administration not be brave, but still claim itself as a progressive institution. It becomes really easy to like give up and like fall back and like, like, fine, it's just a couple hundred Black students that are not getting in. Like, who cares? But it does matter, because I was a Black student that was admitted through affirmative action, and I'm the president, and because of that, like, it matters. So I'd advise the next student body president to not give up on those same ideas, to keep pushing, because one thing about administration is that they may have hard heads, but one thing I've realized through, studying the history of our iteration of Boston University student government is that constant pressure does eventually lead to change. It just has to be continuous. It has to be shrewd. You cannot let up on these people because they get paid to say no, and you don't. I don't get paid for this. So I'd advise them not to give up on the issues.
On that note of not giving up, like we'll take it a bit personally.
Okay.
How do you guys balance things? How do you balance leadership? How do you balance your academic priorities, your academic responsibilities? How do you balance your mental health? How do you balance your familial lives, your relationships? I don't know if any of you guys are in romantic relationships or anything like that. Don't gotta tell me. But how do you guys still operate as humans? And how do you guys make your life experience a holistic experience with this with the titles and the positions that you guys hold?
I guess I can take it on. For me, you just gotta I think you just have to do it. As much as I enjoyed being in this position for this past year, I am I'm really looking forward to sort of stepping off and letting the next group of people do it because it's really hard.
I feel that, yeah.
It's really hard. It takes a significant amount of time to do this job, and it's time that you have to spend doing other things as well. Because as much as you enjoy college, you eventually have to take the next step, and to take the right next step, there's a lot of things you have to do. And so, I would say me and Ashley, we're probably in meetings. How many hours a week? We're a lot of hours a week of purely just meeting, and that's not taking it into account meeting before the meetings, planning those. What is the meeting going to look like? Doing the actual actions after the meeting, everything like that. So it's really hard to manage, and I wish I had an answer that was voila, this is how you do it. But unfortunately, you just have to prioritize, right? You have to go into it. If I could go back and talk to myself right before I was about to step in this role, I would hopefully tell myself to be more organized, sort of make buckets of what's important to you, what has to be prioritized, because you have a limited amount of energy, a limited amount of time, and you just won't be able to do everything you want to do, and so you have to prioritize. And so for me, the way that I've been able to, I think at least have weeks where I've had oh, you know what, this is manageable, is by being organized, looking forward and seeing what's coming up, and then deciding early on what's important, what has to be prioritized, and then what can be pushed back.
I'll also add to that. I think my biggest mantra during my time in office has been protecting my peace. You won't find me doing anything that I don't enjoy doing. I won't be planning events that I don't enjoy doing. You won't find me doing anything that I don't enjoy. And that's why I'm always so happy. This doesn't feel like a job to me because I'm doing things that I enjoy. And I feel like when you decide to protect your peace and when you decide to stay true to who you are, in these meetings, I don't code switch. I don't code switch. I don't. I stay true to who I am because I find that changing who you are and doing things that don't align with what's true to you is exhausting. And I feel like once you decide to prioritize the things that bring you joy, the things that bring you peace, you don't actually get tired. So yeah, we're stepping off soon, but I'm kind of sad. Dang. I enjoy doing this. So yeah, just protect your peace.
So another question that I'll ask is just about leadership in general. What are some of your leadership philosophies, or even I know I had asked a question prior, and the question was who's your favorite bridge builder and why? And not necessarily that it has to be the same person that you're about to touch on, but yeah, who are some people that you guys look to for inspiration for leadership and really ground your leadership practice?
All of my friends know that I'm a big fan of President Obama. Very subtle, but I mean, it's just the way that he, just looking at his presidency, before the presidency, the way that he was able to unite coalitions of people by tapping into the best parts of themselves. Hey, I understand you. I may not agree with you, but I understand that you're a human. I understand that you're a student that has their own concerns, and I may have my own biases. I may have the way that I view the world, but I still have to represent you. You're still paying $90K for this tuition. We're still going, we're still united by something at least, and we can find that. And interestingly enough, during Obama's presidency, like we saw a period of extreme divisiveness in this country. So I guess being okay with the fact that actions that you take are gonna be divisive. I had the pleasure of having the student government that I'm leading be called um, you know bigoted and anti-Semitic because of actions that we took. And you can't really control that. But on the contrary, there are going to be people that are going to be appreciative of what you're doing. So staying secure in that too is key. Yeah.
I guess adding on a little bit more to like leadership styles and things that I've noticed. And I think you also asked a question about like if you were to pass something down to the next student government president, what would it be? I think one of the biggest things has just been communication, in terms of communicating to the rest of the public as to what's actually going on. I ran on like the idea of like better starts now, more so on the idea that like the change that we're looking for needs to start immediately. And I think one of the biggest ways to do that is by communicating what's exactly going on, again, behind these doors to the rest of the public as well. I think one of the biggest things I've noticed, and especially I think these 3 months can just kind of be a testament to it, is that, the things that we don't know are being taken away or added are the things that are affecting us the most, if that makes sense. And so I guess just especially being in student government and just seeing a lot of the things is just one of the best ways to, I think, lead it, just to communicate what's exactly going on. And then I think people knowing and tapping it in. One thing that I'm so blessed about is that I think this year especially, we've seen more and more students say like, hey, like I know what project you guys are working on. I know what initiatives you guys are doing. Like, oh, this is a really great idea that I heard that you guys were talking about in the meeting. I want to add to that. And like one of my biggest passions in life has been to intersect policy and communication. And I think because, if there's policy without people knowing about it, then that's not necessarily a good policy. And so I think this year, especially, we've been trying our best just to communicate as much as we can. And I think, especially when it comes to leadership and future times of leadership, we just need to let people know, I guess, what's going on and what's actually locked in about.
I want to echo something that Joelle said on communication from a different lens, because I agree with you. I also think if I could give like a piece of advice to someone who's coming next, it would be that framing is important. And specifically when you think about what Jonathan said earlier about how institutions are trying to preserve themselves, I think being able to communicate how the vision of change that you have is aligned with the institution's goal is important. And I think a really good example of that is Jonathan and I created the first ever branch of advocacy within our student government. And when we initially brought this to administration, they were like, what are y'all doing? Like, we don't want that. And I think us being able to communicate that by training students on campus to participate in advocacy, we are aligning with Harvard's mission to build the next citizen leaders of the world, because we're teaching students how to identify issues around them, how to advocate on behalf of those issues. So especially now when there is so much division, I think being able to focus on the principles and values that you can agree on and frame your issues around those values, that's going to be really important.
Yeah. And oh, are you gonna add?
No, that was
Okay. Another question that I have is about collaboration. Right. So this panel is consisting of the student body presidents of Tufts University, Harvard University, Boston University. Enoch Ellis from MIT was supposed to join us as well, but he's in North Carolina. But all of that to say, like, from your positions, how do you guys potentially see? How do you already collaborate, and like, where is, if there is, a future for more collaboration outside of like a conversation like this? How are you guys, bringing the institutions together on a student government level? Is that something that is growing? Is it something that hasn't been tapped into just yet to the largest extent? Yeah, what's going on there, and what are your thoughts in that realm?
I know we were trying to plan a lunch with the Black men student body presidents, but when you have like Black men like leading universities, it's kind of hard to schedule a time. But we better get it before the year's over. I know that for sure.
Okay.
But I mean, I think one of the biggest things, we're part of this network called Big. I'm not sure if you guys are also part of it. But I think, and especially when I was making my platform, I'm like, no shame about it. I love to look at what other people are doing and try my best to replicate. I love looking at other universities and seeing initiatives and projects. I think I spoke with one of the former student body presidents of Harvard about their summer storage project. I love just reaching out to one of my friends. She's the president of UNC as well. And so I think one of the biggest things is a lot of people are fighting the same battles or same issues. And just, I think, it's great to go with someone else and to see exactly how they did it. Obviously, different endowments, different class sizes, different hoops and struggles that we each have to go through. But in the same vein, I think, I mean, one thing that I'm so proud of and I love is just seeing that the people around me are still doing amazing and great projects. And I think it encourages us to do better. It encourages us just to try our best to replicate some of these projects, if not adapt to our own universities. But I love the idea of just seeing, especially, I mean, the fact that one of the best schools in Boston are being led by Black people only shows that like we got to copy what each other are doing, or if not, try to emulate it in a much broader way. So we're doing something right, and so I think it's one of the best ways to keep going is to try our best to collaborate more often.
Just throwing out an idea. Something easy that we could even just do right now is like seeing something that relates to Tufts on the recent student that was unfortunately had her visa revoked and was arrested by masked agents and deprived of her right to attorney for 24 hours and taken to where she at now, Louisiana. There's something that unites us now too, which is concern for the international students in which we represent, which we're elected to represent, who could at any point, because of speaking their mind, have their education, their homes, everything taken away from them at, in the blink of an eye. So if we want to talk about, collaboration and finding ways to work together, I think that is a perfect starting step is to, unite together and express concern to our administrative bodies that, you guys should do a little bit more to protect our international students who are really hurting at this very moment. BU has a pretty sizable international student population who happen to be very vocal on these issues, and there's a sense of fear that I think that something that is collaborative from us would really try and help address that. Hey, if, at least if administration isn't willing to take that first step and be brave, as they're often not, and protect your students, what are the ways in which student governments can do that, right? Recently, my social advocacy department went to great lengths to printing a document which has immigrant rights on it, and just disseminating that information out to the student body, giving people tips at protests, being there at protests to make sure that everything is going okay. Apart from the collaboration, apart from messaging, there's real concrete steps that we can do apart from administration, who, I sound very skeptical of administration throughout this panel, and I'm going to maintain that skepticism throughout. I think that when we want to talk about change, it really does start with us.
All right, so the next question we'll talk about like what's next for you guys. I know you guys are juniors, so it may be a little bit different, but would still like to hear about your future aspirations and your entrepreneurial efforts as well. And then as two seniors, like where do you guys see your leadership going post grad? And what are some of the things that you'll take from your time in your position and apply to wherever it is you go next?
I guess I can start. I'm gonna apply to law school. And after law school, I do want to have a career in business law, but I do feel drawn to politics. I think that that's where my heart resides. So I definitely want to find my way there. But the first step right after school is unfortunately law school applications.
Yeah.
Similar to Kwasi, I have a job as a paralegal, psycho actually, at a law firm in New York these next 2 years. And then I guess during that time, try my best to study for grad school, still thinking between either law school or business school. But in the same vein, one of my biggest passions is New York City, like politics and public affairs especially. I have a really big passion for marketing and communications, and so trying to figure out a way that can intersect both that policy and law field, but also in, I guess, communicating, especially to my home city. That's one of my biggest passions in life.
For me, actually, like you said, we have one more year left. I think for me, it's about pivoting to something else. I think I'm probably going to try to explore the entrepreneurial space a little bit more. we have this thing called the Harvard iLabs, which is essentially just an incubator on campus for any student to come through, sort of come have focus groups, understand what idea they want to do, what they want to develop, and then once they develop it, what does it look like to get funding? What does it look like to get angel investors? Go through this sort of different series, and so just for me, I think that is the next step, and then also just studying for my LSAT, preparing my law school application. I will be writing a thesis as well, so thesizing that entire year, wrapping up my joint concentration. Because so I'm studying government alongside with philosophy, so that means like I have the thesis. So just making sure all these sort of like different loose ends that have kind of been trailing behind because my focus on this are wrapped up, and also just enjoying my final year in college. I think a lot of us have taken on a lot in terms of what we're trying to impact, and I think that comes with a lot of stress, because what we're trying to change is, I don't know, something that's been built over centuries, and so it's really hard to deal with that and maintain, I guess, the sort of, it's hard to be relaxed when you're doing this role, and it's hard to just enjoy life without thinking about all these different factors. Like, oh, like you go to an event, and it's like, what does this event look like? The plan, what is it? It's just so many different things that I think you subconsciously automatically think of when you're going through this role. So I think for me, it's sort of stepping back and once again figuring out what I care about. What does it look like for me to like be fulfilled and live a fulfilled life, and sort of deciding that. And I know you guys are gonna go off, but personally for us, after this, we get a year to digest sort of this experience and then sort of proceed. So that's what I'm focused on.
Yeah. One of the things I said earlier is that one of my philosophies is you don't have to have everything figured out. And I think that's true for this answer. I don't have everything figured out. But I do know that I care about empowering marginalized communities. And so I know that once I'm done sort of with this, I'm going to go back to my roots. I have Our Story, Our Worth, and I meet with those girls. So maintaining my mentorship with them. But also, I've been getting involved in a felony disenfranchisement project in Boston. So I'll be doing some work with that. I'll be thesising. I'll be studying for LSATs. And I'll be side questing, honestly, living my life. So yeah, I think I don't have it all figured out, but I think just focusing on the things that matter to me.
Thank you guys for all of those responses, and wish you all the best of luck in those endeavors as well. Kwasi and Joel, best of luck wrapping up senior year. You know, I'll definitely see you around. I may see you like a couple of times.
chat, bro.
Yeah. And then I may see you all at Harvard as well sometime soon. But those are all the questions for me. We'll now take some time to pass it over to the audience. If you guys have any questions, I know there's a couple of people on Zoom too. If they have any questions. But yeah, we'll start. I saw 1 and 2 and then 3. Oh, okay.
Okay.
I'm sort of all with to talk more about that. Why you made it, what's it about?
Yeah, so I'm from Miami. For context, Our Story, Our Worth is an organization that seeks to empower young women of marginalized groups through mentorship, sisterhood, and service. So that's our mission. The reason why I say that I'm from Miami is because in Miami, we have something called 5,000 Role Models, which is essentially an organization for young Black men, and it equips them with resources to change their circumstances. A lot of them are from inner city communities, gives them mentorship, it gives them resources, but nothing existed for young girls that looked like me. So I saw Our Story, Our Worth as filling that gap. I started it when I was in high school, and it's something that I'm still deeply connected to today in terms of mentorship.
Black people like high school, college, like middle school.
Yeah, so we work with girls in middle school and high school.
Do you plan to expand outside Miami?
It's something I've been looking into. Currently, it's just within Miami-Dade, but if you have ideas, I'm open to chat. Wait, I love. Let's connect. Let's connect. I love it.
I think you have a question as well.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? First, thank you so much for showing up. This is a really good conversation. My name is Akil. I'm from Cornell University, and I'm wondering, kind of, in the midst of a lot of political unrest, a lot of things going on campus, off campus, what role does student organizing, like protesting and things like that, what role does that play in terms of your agenda setting and decision making? I know Joel, of course, you had a lot going on just in this past week, and also in the past year and a half for everybody. Well, let's hear about it.
I guess I can start, right? So I think what we first have to acknowledge is the scale of the problem, right? There's sort of the attacks that we've been seeing on protesting, the sort of attacks that are like just on free speech and everything. I think we have to acknowledge is not just a college level problem. Therefore, it doesn't have just a college level solution, right? I think oftentimes what students want is a solution from the student government, or a solution from administration, right? And when you're again thinking about the scale of this problem, it runs much deeper and much larger than that. So when we think about, I think solutions to sort of what does it look like for us to protect students from these attacks? What does it look like for students to feel safe expressing their opinions, or for students to do this and this and this? And I think a lot of it is, I think, through community organizing much more than it is through decision making, right? I think we as a people have to first express the importance of this right to ourselves, right? We have to say together that we should be able to express our opinions. We should feel comfortable doing this and this and this, and not feeling afraid. And I think we also have to recognize the source of the issue, right? The source of the problem. I think specifically within this context, and I think that's the frame of this conversation. Oftentimes, I think students or people want someone that's easy to blame, and I think student government and administration often is the one that catches the heat for it. And I think, but through virtue of being in conversations with administration and sort of seeing like firsthand administration themselves seeking to adapt to these issues and sort of really, I think they're all in shambles. I think attempting to understand what is going on, right? Because the source of this issue again is like the president, right? These executive orders that have been being like sort of funneled through the day after day, day after day, day after day. Law firms, government agencies, all these sort of different groups attempting to sort of figure out what is possible. I think we have to recognize what that problem looks like. And so I don't know what it looks like to agenda set, but I think the important step is to sort of community organize. So get feedback, right? Because this isn't a solution that you can figure out yourself. I think for me and Ashley, something that we've been focused on is like we've acknowledged that we don't have an answer. We understand that we don't have a solution, but what we want to do is we want to create spaces where students can get together. Stakeholders can form groups, talk, form conversations. But what does it look like to resist things like this together? Because we understand that it can be a top-down solution, and it can be something you talk like by yourself. I don't know. I think that was a lot coming at you. So sorry about that.
I guess even adding on to that point, I'm just thinking of two things. I think one, um, especially being someone who was like involved with the RA union, we had a really big strike and protest at the start of my junior year. And I think one of the beauties of, I guess, the union president and then student body president was I was able to kind of see the beauty of being in the system and also being outside of the system too, in the sense that like the student government was the one who actually approved the resolution to recognize the union, but in the same vein, being a part of the union to protest the fact that our administrators weren't meeting our demands and weren't listening to us. And I think one thing that I just noticed, not even just from the RA union protest, from joining in, being a part of other protests on campus, is that your presence of just showing outrage has already, I guess, is a first step in so many different ways. Like a lot of students have said, like, yo, like, seeing you there or like understanding that like the student body president is also mad about what's going on, also, I guess, expresses those same outrage, already kind of tells a lot of students that, hey, like, there's people who are a part of these conversations and part of these rooms who are also fighting from it too. Obviously, that's not the surefire way for everybody, and like, I understand there's different restrictions and requirements for other people, but I guess my biggest thing has always been like, if the student body is mad, you as a student body president should also be mad as well. Like I guess like you should kind of mirror the same energy of your constituents. That's thing one. But thing two, I think, has been like protests are never, I guess, a group's first choice, if that makes sense. Nobody, in my opinion, wants to protest. The idea is that because my voice isn't being heard, I have to pick another outlet. And so I think the biggest thing I've noticed, especially in student government, when it came to the resolutions that caused a lot of protests on our campus, was the idea that these students who were writing these resolutions and saying, hey, we want justice for these group of people, they weren't being able to be connected with the president of the university. And so our job in student government was how can we get these individuals who are protesting to be in this room with the president, to be able to vocalize their demands and their concerns to him and be able to hear him first and foremost. And so I think, especially as we evolve in student government and as we're seeing more and more students who want to protest, who want to get engaged, who want to exercise their civic responsibility, how can we make sure that those people who are able to protest outside of the quad are also being able to be a part of the trustee boardroom, are able to still be a part of the conversations where they can have the demands be met. Because, our job isn't just to watch and to comment, but it's to how can we facilitate these discussions? Because, my voice isn't more important than someone else's, if that makes more sense.
Yeah. When I'm everything that Joel said is absolutely true. And in terms of, if the student body is mad, then you have to channel that. I strongly believe that the student body president should not be like a passive kind of person who, talks about like academics, the institution, what we believe about, uh, you know, federal funding and health. All of that is very important. But there are issues that matter to people. Like there are issues of real existential worth to people. And I strongly believe that the student body president should place themselves at the vanguard and at the forefront of those issues. So interestingly enough, you talked about the RA strikes and stuff. We literally saw the same ones, the same sort of strikes at our university. And how it looked like for the then student body president to place themselves at the vanguard was to, tell students directly, go to students directly, and publicize the fact that administration was threatening to fire striking workers, was threatening to use generative AI to replace our striking grad workers. It also, he also spoke at a rally with the SEIU, where Elizabeth Warren was present. You have to place yourself in these issues. You cannot shy away from these issues, because if you place yourself at the vanguard of these issues, administration sees that you're a serious person, and it gives you more levity. It gives you more power when you talk. And at the same time, it's not about just huffing and puffing and talking and protesting and whatnot. You have to place yourself. You have to maintain a cordial enough uh, relationship with administration whereby you can be in these rooms to talk. I think something that gave me more power when we're discussing issues concerning divestment of university funds from certain areas was the fact that I can talk the talk about what we should do as an institution, but I can also walk the walk because I'm a part of a committee that handles the same issue. If we want to talk about Black mental health, I can talk the talk and talk about how important it is, but at the same time I can represent myself in another committee that handles these same issues. So it's a fine line to tread if you really want to make change, but understanding that you're an uncompromising vanguard for social change, but at the same time, like you're somebody that can see multiple sides and work with administration to get a better outcome for all students.
You got a question as well?
Oh yeah. I really like you guys' response to that one. And also back to what Siko said, thank you guys for coming. This is really inspirational. And I love hearing you guys talk. I'm sorry for making you guys reiterate anything, but hearing some of the challenges you guys have faced, I'm just out of curiosity, like what is one of the most surprising challenges you guys have all faced? Like I just want to hear from each of you that you guys normally don't get to talk about, or is that you guys have like had to like overcome in your positions.
I'm gonna say that I think the biggest one is I think coming in with a lot of ideas as to how to fix our university and like how to make it better. And then I mean, we spoke about it previously, but seeing administrators kind of say no was the biggest thing. Obviously, I get it. Like they've been there much longer. They've seen the ups and the downs. But in the same vein, sometimes like like there would be like hours planning like a proposal and like, okay, like we'll do this, we'll do that, we'll do this, we'll do that, we'll get this, we'll get that. And then coming over there and just like, you're crazy. And then like, just sending us back to the drawing board. And I think that's kind of the biggest thing, is like being able just to really bounce back and being also able to show the rest of the team that you're unfazed by it. Like there'll be days where I'll like go in and like, okay, like we got this, like talk in a meeting, have this planned out, and then come back to the drawing board to the rest of the team and saying like, all right, they say no, but like we like we're gonna spin back, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that, and kind of still being that same cheerleader no matter what. I think one thing that like we were talking about a little bit during this panel is that sure, it's great that we're the student body presidents, but we have a large team of people who are right below us, and your energy really does affect their mood as well. Like I've seen, especially someone who's been in the front, been in the back, is like when your president looks kind of blasé, isn't really as engaged, or is letting what's going on kind of bog them down. It also bogs you down. But if you're able to like come back and even honestly lie and just be like, yo, like we're up, we got this, you know, we're still in it. It still really pays off a lot too. Yeah.
I think we can sort of take this in. For context, our student government at Harvard is like really unique because what happened was like 3-4 years ago. We had this group called Undergraduate Council, right? That was our form of student government, and people were really mad at it. Like people just did not enjoy the experience. It wasn't very effective to people's like opinions. It was spending money recklessly. It was just there was a lot of bureaucracy. It just the takeaway being it was really bad. And so this person became like the president of the undergraduate council on essentially a ticket of disbanding the student government, right? So it was like elect me, and then I will disband this and give you a new form, or at least like I will get rid of this like the undergraduate council. And so he wins. They have a referendum, which is like this like student body wide vote on disbanding the UC, and so the UC gets disbanded, and the UC is what you traditionally see as like a traditional student government. So there's like a legislative body, there's you pass resolutions, you fund organizations, but that's it. And so in exchange for that, they created what we now run, which is called the Harvard Undergraduate Association, which takes on a much different form, right? So we're team based, so we have me and Ashley as the co-presidents, and then we have 11 other officers or 9 other officers who each take the helm of an area of the student life. So there will be a residential life officer, there will be a social life officer, sports officer, repeating. And so because of that, because of his age, there's a lot missing from the structure and constitution of our organization. So a big thing that me and Ashley were trying to focus on is sort of how do we build institutional knowledge? How do we take what we do and keep it moving forward? Because when we got into the position, there really wasn't much to build on. There was like maybe like a 10-page constitution. Like how long would you say your constitution?
I'm gonna say at least 50 pages.
At least 50 pages, right? And so we had the UC had like I think similar like 50-page constitution that has rules and regulations for all sorts of situations. And so for us to go from that to a 10-page constitution, it's still trying to figure out what it looks like for to be a student government on Harvard's campus, while also dealing with still groups of students who are like disband the HUA, right? And so for us, I think a big part was how do you figure out what it looks like to build something, and how do you keep it forward, like moving forward. So we tried to build buy-in from students. We expanded our executive cabinet. We did a lot of outreach to try to get students interested in the student government. I think for you guys, because it's built in already, there's already a lot of interest. For us, that was something that we had to focus on, where we had to convince students really to sort of participate in our student government as like not only participants but as leaders. And so I think that was our biggest challenge, was sort of building that legitimacy from the ground up.
One of the things that I'll add, I think personally, one of the big challenges that I have had to overcome, and I think Jonathan too, is striking a balance between meeting the individualized needs of the students that we serve, and not alienating others. And I think a really salient example for me is, I'm sure everyone in the room is aware of like how students at Harvard were doxxed last year. And I will never forget the students who came to us like in tears about being doxxed, feeling unsafe. And in that moment, Jonathan and I were grappling with how do we ensure that their safety needs are being met while also not alienating other groups on campus. And so I think what sort of we had to realize is that in division, there's always some sort of common ground. There's always something that can be leveraged to unite. And I think that is sort of the takeaway. Like in serving diverse needs, you need to be able to find something that threads it all together and lean into that. So that would be sort of my challenge takeaway sort of thing.
And I'd like to add one more thing, which is, sorry, I've been talking a lot, but
You're good.
it's this, is that you have to understand what your organization is best suited for, right? And so sometimes you come into a position, you're like, I want to do this and I want to do that, but you're severely limited by the structure and the goal of your organization, right? And so sometimes you have to adapt yourself to sort of still figure out, how do I get to this goal of mine, which is to better the student life experience of like this group of people, and how do I do it within the confines of this organization, within the structure of this organization. So I think for us as the HOA, because it didn't look like a traditional student government, we are less able to be political, right? We're less able to put out statements like directly in our constitution. When they created it, they said like the HOA cannot take political stances. We cannot release political statements. We don't release resolutions. So for us, we're severely hampered as to what we can do politically, right? So what me and Ashley tried to focus on was how do we materially impact the lives of students, right? How do we go about giving funding to the right to the groups of students so that they can put out programming? How do we work with administration to sort of secure the yard or secure house so that students feel safe on campus? And so, yeah, I'd just like to add on to the fact that sometimes your organization is limited, and so you just have to adapt to sort of see how can I impact the people while still like existing within the system.
Yeah, and I think to maybe paint the picture just a little bit clearer, since I mentioned the doxing example, like the way that the common thread was found was that we pushed for administrators to like close down the gates and ensure that strangers weren't coming on campus and accosting students who were expressing their views, right? Like that's not us necessarily releasing a political statement, but it is prioritizing that common thread, which is safety and ensuring that students feel safe on campus. So I think, yeah, Jonathan has a good point. Like making sure that you're able to understand sort of the limits and the constraints that your organization has and leaning into the things that you can do.
For me, one of the biggest challenges that I went through personally was trying my hardest not to get upset at administrators for being uncaring about issues that you care about, which is fair because you're getting paid, but B, also like lying. And I know it's funny, like I really am skeptical of a lot of people. But it is true. You have to confront these issues as they are. You have to take people as they are, or else you'll be a sitting duck when you're president. I only have 1 year to implement the policies that I want to implement, right? I'm not just gonna take no for an answer, even though you just said yes a couple days ago. So a big part of my journey was learning that, some people are gonna be dishonest and they're gonna look you in the eye and say one thing and then they're gonna do another. But the right step isn't to get angry that they did it. It's to understand how to get them back to the yes. And that is usually done by, keeping a cool head, explaining where you're coming from, and then putting them on the back foot as well, too, right? If, my dean of students office doesn't want to fund Ramadan iftar meals for low-income students because they claim it's too much money, how can I put you on the back foot and how can I make you stand on business? And that's by asking whether or not you really care about your students, right? I have, Muslim students that are coming to me and talking about the challenges that they have, paying for these meals. You're trying to enjoy community. It's a religious obligation. So I have to address those issues. And for the sake of those students, I cannot take no for an answer, despite the fact that you're lying. The stakes are just too high. So for me, it's learning not to be upset, learning to take everything as it comes, and then coming back to administration with a better proposal, putting them on the back foot, making them stand on business. And it's worked a couple times because at least for the Ramadan case, I was able to help the Ramadan iftar program get fully funded for Ramadan. But in some cases, it didn't really work out, as with the affirmative action case when I wanted to release a statement out, talking about Black issues to the student body. They weren't going for that. So it's gonna come, and go. You're gonna find ways in which you can make, change that you want to make. But the constant thing is that there are gonna be people that are gonna be dishonest, and you just have to find a way to deal with that.
Okay, yeah, this will be the last question, then we'll transition into the next one.
So it's a push up on you guys right now, trying to get but for me, that really dissuades me from like student assembly, politics at large, bigotry, like bigotry, people just don't see the growth logic. It's like, how do you guys, obviously as student body presidents, deal with bigotry as like in such a important role? So I know it's kind of a long-winded answer. That's all I've answered. You deal with bigotry position.
Like directed towards us?
Yeah, or the issues you care about, for example, affirmative action, DEI, like how do y'all deal with don't use logic?
Yeah. You just, I mean, you can't argue with people like that, to be honest. At the end of the day, when it came to affirmative action, what I wanted to talk about, I had people in my own student government that, you know, didn't agree with the position that I was taking. But at the end of the day, to put it bluntly, I got elected. So if the student body if the student body didn't want a black voice, they wouldn't elect a black person.
That
At the end
part,
of the day, they could have elected a person who was white and doesn't have the same experiences, and by virtue be able to talk about the same issues that I care about. So making it clear to at least people internally my organization, we're gonna be on the same page. And if you disagree, that's fine. But it's not necessarily getting angry at that person, because I understand that because of your life experiences, you may not be able to see things as I do. But at the end of the day, I'm going to count on my ability to get other people on my side, and then move through the process as I would. Hopefully that makes sense.
And I guess even adding to that point too, like that's kind of goes back to the main point about like we need more black people or more like students of color to run for these positions. Because I can't change the fact that people who have bigoted ideas are speaking and talking. Just make sure that they don't have the biggest microphone, if that makes sense. Like I can't control whether or not you have these opinions or you disagree with DEI or affirmative action. But what I'm gonna try to do is try to get more students who believe what I believe or understand the gravity of the situation or understand systemic inequalities to be in positions that matter. So kind of similar to Kwasi, like, I mean, they're not elected, so I want to make sure that more and more students who can fight for these issues are in these positions that do matter. And I think one of the biggest things that I think you've all touched on is like leaving a legacy. And I think especially for the future, trying our best to get more and more students to be a part of these rooms, to be in these positions of power that aren't just student government. I mean, one of the biggest things that's, student body president is not the most important position on campus as well. But just trying our best to get more students who believe in right and wrong and kind of don't have these bigot ideas to be in positions that do matter.
I think for me, you just, I think like Kwasi said, like you just don't deal with bigotry, right? Like you have to just force them to have a realistic conversation that's based on logic, and if they're not willing to have that, that's just too bad, because I'm not having a conversation with you about bigotry, and that's it. But I think it's never nice to be in these rooms, and I don't know, I haven't been in too many rooms where that has been like openly expressed, but when it does happen, it's never nice. But it's never stopped me. It's never been a barrier to entry, because I think one of my favorite quotes of all time, because I think you brought up politics a little bit, is this. I think it's politics. You may not be interested in politics, but politics is for sure interested in you, right? So like regardless of how you feel in these rooms, it's to the point of you not being there, your life experience will only get worse, right? Right. If they go into that room with these bigoted viewpoints, right, then they're not gonna have the counterfactual, right? They're not gonna have me saying, actually, that doesn't make any sense because this and this and this, right? Actually, that's not based on logic because this and this and this, right? And so I think the important thing is sometimes, unfortunately, you have to sacrifice some aspects of. I don't actually doesn't believe in this, right? Because he's like he's gonna protect their peace, right? But with me, it's sort of like sometimes your peace has to be sacrificed to a certain degree because you have to be in that room, right? And sometimes you have to put like the well-being of your people as a whole over your personal well-being, in my opinion. And so that's my thing. The first is just don't deal with bigotry. Make them have a conversation that's based on something that's not, as you put it, not logical. And then the second part of it is like, please don't let that stop you from getting involved and making a difference because you need to be in these rooms.
Yeah, I'll add to that quickly. I do think it's important to protect your peace and understand your capacity, but and this might be a little bit of a hot take. I actually think that oftentimes bigotry doesn't come from a hateful place. It comes from a place of ignorance. And I think that if you're unwilling to put yourself in rooms to provide that exposure, that this is what Black excellence looks like I am a human. I'm not what you claim I am. If you're not willing to put yourselves in those positions, those bigoted ideas will continue to persist. So I think it's about seeing the human behind that bigotry and being willing to engage in conversation that centers y'all's shared humanity. Like at the end of the day, we're all human. We all have core values. And I think it's important to use that as a means for advancing conversation. And the last tidbit that I'll add is in one of my classes this past week, we talked about a case study about a Black man in the South who had a conversation with a KKK organization in his town. And through having conversations with them, he was able to get them to dismantle the chapter, right? Like, I think it's about putting yourselves in positions where you are able to bring light to those spaces through exposure and understanding that oftentimes bigotry is not because of hate, it's because of ignorance. So those are my 2 cents.
Thank you guys so much for an amazing panel. Very, very motivating, very inspiring. Like, really want to give each of you your kudos in your respective institutions and your respective leadership position. I think, we're in unprecedented times at the moment. And I know I'm very confident in your guys' ability to navigate the waters that are ahead of you guys. And I wish you all nothing but the best as the semester continues to progress on and you have to deal with some of that bigotry, some of those expectations, some of those no's from administration. And I hope that alongside my personal support, the people in the audience, alongside your constituents at your universities will continue to support you guys as well. But thank you guys so much for your time. After this, we'll go right into our next panel. I hope that all of you can stay because it's going to build off of a lot of things we talked about here. It's called Strength in Numbers, Political Engagement, Activism, Community Mobilization. We talked about a lot of things in this past panel about institutions and the kind of confines that they're in. This next panel will talk about outside of the institutions, how can we get involved in organizations, coalitions of our own, and then also of others to impact and actually create change. So once again, thank you guys so much.
Thank you for having us.